All right, we're talking about my journey in player development. Last episode, or part one, which you can find here, talked about how I got into player development. Today, we're talking about my player development journey in the role. How I went from the University of Houston, go Cougs, to the University of Kansas, helmet up there, and to the Baylor University I have a Big 12 championship ring behind me. So we're going to talk about my path from university to university in the player development role. Hello. My name is Ed Jones II. I'm the founder of Beyond the Field Player Development, where we help you create impactful player development plans. Player development is defined as the enhancement of the athlete experience through holistic and intentional programming and initiatives. If you want to learn more about player development and what I was able to use, the program I used while I was at these three places, the Player Development Guide ebook is there for you to purchase. Go in the show notes, click the link. It has everything I used in the role at these three universities. All right, so let's talk about being in the role at these three universities. Like I said, the book will cover everything I use. Today I'm going to talk about the path. So I talked about last time how I got into it at the University of Houston. I was hired by Tom Herman. Tom Herman then transitioned to Kansas. I was hired by Major Applewhite, and I was at the University of Houston for 3 years. 1 year under Coach Herman, 2 years under Coach Applewhite. So as we came into the second year of Coach Applewhite being the head coach, there were rumors, football scoop, rumors all around that basically we were going to get fired and they were going to hire Dana Holgerson. The biggest rumor was they were waiting till December 31st so his buyout can go from $4 million from West Virginia to $1 million. And so we kind of were sitting there like sitting ducks, and we lost to Army in the Fort Worth Bowl, Armed Forces Bowl. I don't want to talk about that score. You can research it. It wasn't a good score. They beat us pretty bad. So we're kind of sitting there like, we know they're going to fire us, right? This is kind of a weird deal when you're, dealing with the administration that was there at the time in my alma mater. Love the University of Houston, but that was what it was. It was a weird deal where we're sitting there like ducks. And so what I started to do was I literally started writing letters to every single coach in college football. Yes, I wrote a letter to every coach that just got hired. The only coach who wrote back to me was Mac Brown, and he wrote back to me when I was at KU. Alex Brown was still at the University of Houston at the time. He's at Ole Miss now. Shout out to my guy Alex Brown. And he sent me this letter saying, hey, Coach Mac Brown reached out to you. So, do y'all want to hear the letter? Do y'all really want to hear the letter? Do y'all want me to read the letter that I wrote to coaches? All right, here we go. Let's find this letter. Here we go. All right, it took a little time, but I found the letters. I wrote them to 9 new head coaches. I'm going to read the one that I wrote to Coach Mac Brown because he actually wrote back. This is the letter I wrote to all the coaches. Once again, we're sitting there. We knew it was going to come. I didn't know I was going to meet the new head coach, so I wrote this. Coach Brown, congratulations on becoming the newest head coach at the University of North Carolina. I sent you this brochure to highlight the development program I've created here at the University of Houston for our football program. I don't know your plans for your staff, but if you're interested in a director of player development, please keep me in mind. I will be at the American Football Coaches Association convention in San Antonio if you would like to meet. Thank you, and I wish you much success. I wish much success for you at North Carolina. Yeah, so I had a pamphlet, which we'll talk about a little later, but I wrote this to all the coaches, and I didn't hear anything back, and that was interesting and fun. But something did happen. So the day we were going to get fired, so this is in the new year, I had went to Kansas with my wife for a family member's wedding. And so I go with my wife to a family member's wedding, and I'm sitting there like, hey, it's in Kansas City. So we're like, hey, my wife went to Kansas State, so we stopped by Kansas State, and I'm like, oh, KU's on the way back home. And so I'm thinking to myself like, hey, let's go to KU. And so unfortunately, we didn't have a chance to go to KU. I did go to K-State, hand it off to the strength coach there. It was freezing. I'm from Houston, Texas. It was so cold. I was like, here, take the pamphlet. Here's my card. I got to go. So we didn't get to go to KU. My wife was like, hey, if it's in God's will, it's going to work out how it's supposed to work out. I got back to the University of Houston, and my director of football operations, shout out to Marcus Tubbs. Marcus Tubbs was like, hey, Ed, did you hear anything from Kansas? And I was like, how do you know I was at Kansas? Well, I didn't go to Kansas. He was like, hey, I gave them your number. So I'm kind of like, you hear that a lot in athletics, like, People are going to call you, whatever. You hear that. It happens all the time. So I didn't think nothing of it, right? We're literally about to get fired. The day we're about to get fired, I'm talking to our trainer and I'm like, hey, I'm about to go get fired. Literally when I say the word fire, I get a call, 785 number. It says Lawrence, Kansas. They say, hey, are you Ed Jones? I said, yes. They said, we heard you're the guy we need for the role. I said, oh, I absolutely am the guy you need for the role, but let me get fired first. And so I went in there, the AD fired us. I'm like, come on, man, like, let's go. We ain't got time for this spill. We know you're going to fire us. We found out that we weren't going to talk to the head coach. And so I was ready to get to moving. So the number one thing, and I'll use this, we'll go through 5 or 6 things that helped me transition from school to school. The first one was they knew what I could do. So going back to this story, someone had called Marcus Tubbs, my director of football operations, and asked him, did he want to do it? He said, I don't want to do it, but we have a guy here that if you're not looking for a former player, this guy is who you need to develop your players. And so that happened to be me. So I get the number, I get the call, I meet with Coach Miles in San Antonio, like I told you, the AFCA convention. So they're like, hey, you're going to meet with Coach Miles in a week. So I'm excited. I got the pamphlet, like I said, at number 2, I was prepared for the interview. I had this pamphlet. I looked for it. I couldn't find it. I got a lot of stuff. One of these videos, I'm going to go through all my player development stuff, all my coaching stuff, tell you what it is, how it helps. And we'll just do that might be like hour and a half. I got a lot of stuff, and some of the stuff I got to get rid of. But I had a pamphlet that literally I would use whenever I would go to companies, because companies would give me a pamphlet. And I'm like, I'm coming here asking for internships and opportunities, and I ain't got nothing. And so I had this pamphlet about what we did. I had mailed it to all the coaches, but when I sat down with Coach Miles, I was able to give it to him as well. One thing I realized when I was sitting there, Coach Miles went to the restroom and his notes were probably about 2 feet away from me. So I could literally see his recommendations. And I had one of the longest recommendations from Dan Carroll. Shout out to Dan Carroll, who's on the Coastal Carolina staff. And he recommended me for so much. And it was crazy that his recommendation was that long, because I didn't think he knew what I was doing. I didn't think the position coaches fully knew what I was doing. So my number one tip with that, and what helped me get from Houston to KU, is that other people knew what I was doing. My director of football operations, Dan Carroll, Barrick Neely, shout out to Barrick Neely, who's at Texas State. DJ Elliott was defensive coordinator who just got hired at Kansas. He was asking Barrick Neely about me. I know Barrick Neely from other people who I met in sports or I go to church with. We just know the same group of people, and they're like, oh, Ed's a great guy. So the number one thing that helped me get to Kansas was what I can do, who I was, and other people's thoughts about me. Number 2, I talked about it a little bit. The second thing that helped me transition from Houston to KU was I was prepared. I had the pamphlet for the interview. I also listened to Coach Miles' press conference. This is something that I learned from Alex Brown. Alex Brown would always listen to people's press conferences. So when I sent those 9 letters out, I really got that from Alex, because Alex Brown said, hey, did you listen to so-and-so talk about this or that? He's talking about player development or developing players off the field. So I was able to reach out to 9 coaches who had already spoken about that in the press conference. Coach Miles had talked about that. He had talked about how he wanted to create impact off the field. And so I was able to bring that up in the interview with the pamphlet. But I was prepared for the interview. Now, the one thing I did have to prepare myself for was talking to Coach Les Miles. Like, Coach, I'm from Texas. I know what he did at LSU. And so it took me a while. I had to get in there and be like, all right, that's Coach Miles. And then get my mind straight. Like, all right, cool. I'm in here with Coach Miles, but also get my mind straight. Like, I need a job. Like, let's go. Let's get it. He is who he is, and I'm who I am, because we both have done what we do at an elite level. So it took me about 5 seconds to get the cool factor, oh, snap. And then all right, here we go. So yes, I made that happen. And the interview went well. One thing that Coach Miles asked me was, he said, and this is the third point, I was confident in myself. He looked at me, he said, man, this is awesome. You did all this? I said, yes, sir. And I told him how I did it. And I told him how we can get it done in his program. And then at the end of the interview, he said, if I gave you this position, would you take it? I stood up and said, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I take it right now. I can make it happen right now. And I was confident, not on some bravado confidence in myself, like I'm gonna come in there confident. I was confident because I had done the work. I know the work he wanted done, and I know the work that I did. And so I was very confident. Coaches love confidence. Coach Miles loves confidence, because you know anything about Coach Miles, he got swagger about him. So you got to have a swagger and a confidence. And that was the third thing that helped me transition from Houston to Baylor. Number 1, people knew me, right? They knew what I can do. Number 2, I was prepared for the interview. And number 3, I had confidence in myself because of the work that I had done. All right, so let's talk about player development workshop. So I just came off the first workshop I held, and it was incredible. It was incredible to have this workshop. 29 people showed up. We really dove into player development. We got in groups. What I did was I looked at the survey. I got a lot of constructive feedback on how it went very, very well, but what people would add to it. And so I am splitting it up into 2 different workshops. One workshop will be the player development discovery workshop. This is for people who are interested in player development, want to learn more about player development. We're going to dive into the role and what it looks like. And then the other workshop will be a planning workshop. So these are for the people who are in the role, who know they want to dive in, and who need planning help. So if you're interested in any of those workshops, those 2 workshops, please click the link in the show notes that says player development workshop. All right, that kind of took me off. That kind of knocked me off guard when I threw up the dub. But anyway, let's talk about my transition from the University of Kansas to Baylor. Now, at the University of Kansas, I had done a lot. Kansas, I've told people, that's what I said at the workshop. I told people on this podcast, Kansas really ignited my player development journey. 25x'd everything I did. I was allowed to do so much. I'm so thankful to Coach Les Miles and athletic director Jeff Long, who I got to talk to a couple weeks ago. They really allowed me to grow. And Mike Vollmer, they really allowed me to grow. Terry Prentice, shout out to you. Shout out to so many people there. But I was allowed to really grow in my role and create the impact that I wanted to see in athletes. And so when I was there, I was in a good spot. We were in a good place. I was about to ask for a raise because I kind of understood what I was doing in the program, and then COVID hit, and I was like, oh man, I really wanted to get that raise and more. I would say more resources than raises or raise. I was trying to get another person hired to help me because we were doing a lot in player development. Me, myself, and Lauren Hawkins. Shout out to Lauren Hawkins. So yeah, I was right at that stage where I was like, okay, let's go to the next level. Let's get some more commitment from the Kansas side. So one night I'm talking to my wife, and I randomly get a DM on Twitter from Justin Johnson, or Coach Juice, as some of you all may know him. He's at Baylor, and we both went to University of Houston at the same time. And I'm like, he's like, hey man, I haven't talked to you in a while, hit me up. Well, last time I talked to Juice was in a transition from, I want to say from Kansas to TSU, but he was in transition with coaches. He would come from programs, and he came to our practices at the University of Houston for about a week. He played at University of Houston, so we won an alumni there. He was coaching. So we got a lot of time to just talk about what player development is, talk about what I'm doing, talk about programming, like see what he wanted to do. So we had a lot of time to talk, and then he got on at TSU, I believe, and then got on at University of Houston, and then he was at Baylor. And so it was really, really cool to see his journey, his path go. And so when he DM'd me, we got on the phone, we talked. I was like, man, it's awesome to see you at Baylor, man. It's great to see what your career's done. And we had kept in touch. He was like, hey man, we got this player development position. Would you be interested? Now I was taken aback because at this time I was having a player development Zoom call with a lot of people in player development. And if you were at any of those Zoom calls, please press the like button. But anyway, I was having this Zoom call with a lot of people in the space. And so Baylor never had someone in that space. So when he said it, I was like, oh, are y'all creating this? He's like, yeah, we're creating this new role. So I was like, cool, yeah, I'm definitely interested. Like, let's talk about it. I'm from Houston, Texas. My mom, my family is 3 hours away from Waco to Houston. So I was like, yeah, I'm interested in going back to Texas. My wife was interested in coming back to Texas as well. So I'm like, yeah, I'm interested. Let whoever you need to know that I'm interested. And so this goes back to the fourth point in this talk about how I went from school to school is connection matters. Connection matters. I talked to Juice about what I did. We talked about that. When he was in a transition and he was at practice, I was able to tell him what I did. So he understood, oh yeah, Ed Jones was telling me about this when I visited him. And not only did I tell him, he got to see me in person. So he's like, oh man, so if coach is looking for this, man, Ed Jones could do that. So the connection matters. The networking matters not only because I know a name. Oh, it's just let me connect with you on LinkedIn so you can know me. But he knew because I was able to explain what I could do. That practice was super beneficial of him coming to practice for that entire week. It actually helped me. So shout out to Juice. So Juice connects me. I talked to the head coach a couple times. I talked to Marcus Sedberry a couple times, who's at the University of Wisconsin. He was the football AD. And so we're talking about program. We're talking about all these things. And I'm like, you know what? Let's go. I'm excited. I'm interested. Let's talk about all of this. So the fifth point that I want to share in my transition from all these schools or from KU to Baylor was I share what I was able to do. I have talked about end of year review. You can find that episode here. but I had kept an end of the year review from my 2 years at KU. So I just emailed them. I gave them my resume and my 2 end of the year reviews. So they were able to see, oh snap, this is everything he did at KU. And so then when the Coach Aranda wanted to talk about it on the interview, we were able to, then he would say, hey, this is, what is this? Like, what did you do this? I'm able to explain it. So I was able to share what I did in the role at another level. Once again, Juice knew, but I'm talking to 2 people who did not know what I did. So I'm able to share because of this end of year document that I created. Once again, that video is in the link. I'll put it at the end of the video, but I was able to share what I did. I think this is very important. I always talk to people in player development, and that's why I post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, because you do a lot, sometimes you forget. It is important for you to have social proof, or some people say cachet, about what you're doing in the role. Because you never know there's people who do not know what you're doing in the role. Once again, Juice knew because he spent time with me, he saw me, but his head coach and the AD did not know per se, right? And so I was able to show them. So if you're in the role, if you're not in the role, you're looking to transition in the role, it is good to keep some type of tracker of what you've done to impact the lives of athletes or other people. And the last thing that helped me finally get to Baylor was my head coach stamped me. Coach Miles was the head coach at LSU when Coach Dave Aranda was his defensive coordinator. So they had a relationship, and I knew they were going to talk. And so I was very straightforward with Coach Miles. When this situation came, hey, Coach Miles, just want to let you know, I got a call from Baylor. They're interested. He's like, oh, man, we don't want to leave you, or we don't want you to leave. We don't want to lose you, blah, blah, blah. So we start talking numbers, different things like that. And then Coach Aranda called him, and he was like, I'm going to call Coach Miles. Are you okay with it? I'm like, absolutely, call him. And so Coach Miles called him. Then I was offered the job, $40,000 pay raise. So I was out of there. Coach Miles, love Coach Miles. He said, is there anything I could do? I said, Coach, if you're not going to match that salary and the title, I went from Director of Player Development to Assistant Athletic Director of Player Development. I said, Coach, if you ain't going to match it, Coach, I'm out of here. And he laughed because at the time they just couldn't match it. But it was really, really cool to see that I was stamped by Coach Miles. Coach Miles, he laughed. He said, man, we had a conversation. He said, Ed, I wanted to keep you, but I couldn't say nothing but good things about you. So once he's like 10 minutes in, I was like, I'm messing myself up. You're out of here because I'm talking so well about you. And it meant a lot because I helped Coach Miles' program in the player development role. As much as you're helping athletes, you are helping the head coach's program. I provided immense value to Coach Miles to the point where even if he wanted to keep me in this conversation, he could not, because he could only talk about what I did for him and how he was going to miss me. And so those are the 6 things that when I look at my journeys, like I said, in part 1, I looked at my journey, what got me into the role. This episode, I'm looking at my journey that got me from Houston to Kansas to Baylor. And so these are things that help me. I'll go back over them to recap. Number 1, in me going from Houston to Baylor, number 1, they knew what I could do. They knew what I could do. They called for somebody else. That person said, I don't want the job. You need to hire Ed Jones. Number 2, I was prepared for the interview. I had a pamphlet. I watched the press conference. I was prepared. I knew what I could do, but I also knew what the head coach was looking for. Number 3, I was confident in myself, not because of just I'm going to listen to music and get confident. It was because of the action of what I actually did in the role. Going from KU to Baylor, number 4, connection matters. It's important for people to know what you do. Juice, or Coach Justin Johnson, would come to practice when I was at University of Houston. He knew what I did because we talked about it and he saw it in person. Number 5, I shared what I did. I was able to share what I did because I had an end of the year document. I had it all on sheet paper. So Juice knew what I did. He recommended it to the head coach and the athletic director, but then they were able to see it because I sent it. I remember one person on the staff was like, dang, you did all that by yourself? Yes. I was able to send everything that I did. And number 6, I was stamped by my head coach. So the head coach I was leaving stamped me for the head coach I was going to. And this goes back to what I shared in part 1, which you can find right here. Be where your feet are. Be where your feet are. You never know when your name is in another room. I've heard this a lot. You never know when your name is in another room. And so I hope that these two, this part 1 and part 2, and if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, please go back. I hope that this has helped you all that are interested in a player development journey. and you all that are trying to get in, or you all that are in it and maybe looking for your next spot in it, be it another university or another level, I hope that this has helped you, because my thing is I want to make sure that you're doing the right things. But I want you to know there's points that I left in both episodes that I want you to take care of. You cannot just get your eyes so focused on your next step that you forget to do the work where you are. If you don't get anything from part 1 or part 2, make sure that you take care of getting the work done where you are. That is what's going to open up the opportunities for you. Once again, if you want to know all the stuff I use in a role at these 3 universities, the Player Development Guide ebook is in the show notes. You can download, you can have that today. You can purchase it, $20. It'll be in your email today, and you can get started today. Thank you so much for being here. If you learned anything, if anything helped you in part 1 and part 2, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with others. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple, thank you so much. Please leave a review. As I always say, go out and create generational impact. Don't wait. Create that generational impact today. Part 1 is right here if you haven't listened. Thank you. Hey, y'all better get ready for this content. It's going hard. And check out the 5 Minute Friday that's coming this week as well. Peace.